Untold Chapters. Episode script: Idi Amin's rise, Britain's chosen dictator. In 1971, British officials popped champagne in Kampala. They had just helped put a man in power who would go on to kill an estimated 300,000 of his own people. They knew what he was capable of. They armed him anyway. Before he was a dictator, Idi Amin was a product, built, trained, and promoted by the very empire that would later pretend to be horrified by him. Amin joined the King's African Rifles in 1946, a colonial regiment that enforced British rule across East Africa. He had no formal military education. What he had was size. He stood well over 6 feet tall, was a champion boxer, and followed orders without question. To British commanding officers, that combination was ideal. Not because he was skilled, because he was obedient, and because he could be used to intimidate. By the 1950s, Amin was deployed against independence movements, most notably during Britain's brutal suppression of the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya, a campaign later documented for its systematic use of torture and detention camps. Amin's superiors praised his effectiveness. What they didn't advertise was what effectiveness meant on the ground. Uganda gained independence in 1962. Milton Obote became prime minister. On paper, the British Empire was gone. In practice, its fingerprints stayed on everything, including its hand-picked military officer, who kept climbing. By 1966, Amin was commander of the Uganda army. Obote used him to consolidate power, including a violent assault on the palace of the Kabaka of Buganda, Uganda's traditional monarch. For a few years, Obote and Amin were allies of convenience, but by 1970, cracks were forming. Obote began investigating financial irregularities tied to Amin. He also started shifting Uganda's foreign policy toward socialism, toward non-alignment, away from British and Israeli interests. That shift mattered more than history books usually admit. Uganda sat at a strategic crossroads. Britain had commercial interests. Israel wanted a foothold in East Africa to monitor Sudan. Both governments were growing uneasy with Obote's direction, and both had a relationship with the general who was growing uneasy too. In January 1971, while Obote was out of the country at a Commonwealth summit, Idi Amin seized power in a military coup. Declassified British diplomatic communications, later examined by historians, show UK officials had advanced knowledge the coup was likely and did not intervene to stop it. In fact, Britain recognized Amin's new government within days. Why the rush? Because Amin was seen, at least initially, as a business-friendly alternative to Obote. British and Israeli arms deals continued. British companies operating in Uganda expected an easier relationship with the general they had trained, versus a socialist prime minister threatening nationalization. The British press at the time even ran flattering profiles, describing Amin as a jovial, simple soldier, a safe pair of hands. That framing did not survive the decade. Within 2 years, Amin's government descended into one of the most violent regimes in modern African history. Estimates of those killed under his rule range from 100,000 to as many as 500,000 people. Historians most commonly cite around 300,000. In 1972, Amin expelled Uganda's entire Asian population, roughly 80,000 people, many of them British passport holders whose families had lived in Uganda for generations. Their businesses were seized and redistributed, collapsing large parts of the Ugandan economy almost overnight. Britain's response was reactive, not preventive. Diplomatic ties were downgraded. Sanctions eventually followed. But the man causing the crisis was the same man British military training had shaped, and British diplomats had legitimized at the moment it mattered most. Amin ruled until 1979, when Ugandan exiles and Tanzanian forces finally drove him out. He died in exile in Saudi Arabia in 2003, never tried, never held accountable in any court for any of it. The easy version of this story paints Amin as a uniquely evil individual who came out of nowhere. That version is convenient. It is also incomplete. The full version involves an empire that built his career, armed his rise, and recognized his government within days because it served their interests to do so. That part rarely makes the documentaries. This is Untold Chapters. If Africa's history has been told to you in half-truths, it's time we correct the record, one forgotten chapter at a time. If this is the kind of history you want more of, subscribe and let me know in the comments which erased leader we should cover next.